Today I'm going to show you guys how to draw chibi. Okay, so the first step that we're going to do is draw the iconic circle, and it doesn't have to be a perfect circle, you just want it to be a circle. After I draw the circle, I like to do a line for where the middle of the head is going to be, and then from there, that tells me where I should add the chin. The pointiest part of the chin will be here. One tip that I can give here is the looser you are at this step, the better things will come out. You don't want to stress too much about everything because at this stage you can still erase and fix any mistakes that you made. Then I add a little tiny U for the neck. So when it comes to the body, you can use really a very simple shape like a square, or I guess this is a rectangle, isn't it? And you can use that throughout the body. You can use a more oval shape, which is one that I sometimes use. My favorite shape to use when I draw chibi is a teardrop shape, where it starts off really thin and then it gets thicker at the bottom. So it looks kind of like a teardrop, but instead of having the pointy top, you just cut it off where the shoulders are going to be. So that's what I'm going to do for this one. I like to use the teardrop shape because I think it gives variety to the body. So you can see there's going to be a bigger part on the head, then the shoulders are going to be small, and then the waist is going to be large again, and I think that makes your drawing look more interesting. But of course, you can always experiment with the shapes and come up with your own style. Okay, then next I like to add a middle line to the body because I like to add kind of a bikini line to my chibi where the middle line meets. That's where the V is, and I like to do this because then I know where to attach my legs. So the good thing about chibi legs and arms is that you don't really have to draw the joints, so you don't necessarily have to draw the knee joint. Something that I like to do to help me draw the legs though is using an S shape. So it's a really long S shape like this where you're going inward and then you're going outward, and that's what I do for the legs. I do inward, I guess, and then outward, and then we do the same inward and outward. Another tip is to start thicker up here, and as you move down the leg you make it thinner. I think that gives it a very, very cute look. Some people think that to have a really cute chibi you have to have a tiny body and tiny legs, and you can do that if that's your style. I think these sorts of things where it's going thick to thin, they contribute more to the cuteness of a chibi than anything else. And I think the kind of cute belly also makes them cute. You can always draw the joints in there as well, but I find that by using shapes, my drawings look more dynamic and interesting when I don't do that. They look more natural too. And for my legs, I just like to do these little bitsy squarish pointy things at the end. I don't know what to call them, but yeah, that's what I do for the legs. And this is the same thing that I do for the arms, except that for the arms I'm going to give her a little bit of a pose. I'm going to have to, include some more jointish kind of stuff, things that look like joint. I will say though, the easiest way to, I guess, do this if you're just starting out would be to definitely use a reference. References are your friends. So you want to post something interestingly, use a reference. I'm not using a very complex pose here, but I am, posing her a little bit so that it'll look a little bit more interesting. But I still am using the same trick of making the arms thicker up here and thinner down here, and we'll worry about the hands a little bit later. So the next step is definitely to add some clothes, and because I drew the guidelines so dark, I'm actually going to go in and lighten the whole layer. But if you're drawing traditionally, or if you don't know how to do that, I would just suggest drawing your guidelines very lightly. Now I'm going to draw the neck again because I want everything to connect nicely, and the most important thing about drawing clothes is to think about how the clothes wrap around the character. They're not just lying on top. So I'm gonna give her a little jumper, and you can see I'm going around her waist, and I'm not going directly on top of where her legs are. I'm actually going over just a tiny bit and even more flaring out here. And you see again, I'm not just drawing a straight line, I'm doing a curved line because that indicates that this person has stuff underneath their clothing. Like there's a body under it. It's not just on a hanger. The next thing I'm going to do is add a little shirt underneath, and again you can see that I'm going just outside of the line I had before, and I'm rounding off the character. And I'm going to do the same thing over here, just outside, not too much because, you know, this is not a thick material. The material will determine, and this is not super baggy. It's not supposed to be super baggy, but I do just a little bit. And I'm going to add a little cute pocket, the neckline, and some stripe just to, you know, add a little bit more design to the shirt. And actually, something I want to point out here is the design is actually following the curvature of the hand. I'm not just drawing straight lines. So like if I had drawn the shirt like this and then I did these shirt stripes like that, that would not work. You have to draw them going along with the curvature, and the easiest way to find that is to do it along the same as this bottom line right here. The shoes again are going to go slightly over the other line to indicate that, you know, they're going around the body. I'm mostly focusing on that whole idea of going around the body. Then just as a design, I'm going to add these triangles, and I'm going to add some socks going around the body. That's the most important thing when you draw clothes. The next part I'm going to draw is the hair, and hair is honestly really hard to teach because there are so many different types of hair. I'm going to do a very simple hairstyle with kind of a middle part and kind of bangs that are going behind the ear. And I'm going to be drawing straight hair because I think it's the easiest. Some hair tips that I can give is you don't want your hair to be directly on the skull. So if you look at this, this is where the skull would be, this is where the hair is. So that whole space is volume, and I would do the same over here. Also, I started with the hair part because that would help me kind of figure out what direction I was going to go in, but not all drawings are going to need a hair part, so that's just an extra thing, but it helps when they do. And then I'm going to draw the big shape first, and another tip is you want to draw through the shapes, and then you can erase all of the extra parts that you don't need. This is going to help you create more realistic and more kind of consistent looking hair. From here, I like to add a few strands of hair, whether it be in front of the ears, and again I'm using that S shape, or I can add strands of hair like here that are just kind of separate from the rest of the hair. And of course the bottom you can do however you want. I'm just going to add a few little lines to indicate hair. You can make it as detailed or as simple as you want, but you always want to start with the big shapes, and then you can break it down into smaller shapes. Okay, so now we're going to move on to one of the hardest parts, or the hardest part I think, and that is the face, and that's kind of why I leave it for last. So the first tip I have for the face is, if it's your first time drawing, you might want to start with just a straight on face where the down line is in the middle and then the chin is also in the middle. That's going to be easier to draw than this that I'm drawing here. This is a 3/4 view, and that's going to be a little bit harder because you have to include perspective. Now for the sideways line where the eye line is going to be, basically you want to start it where the circle and the U of the chin meet, both here and in this drawing. So we're gonna start it somewhere around here for this one, and basically that's where the eyes are gonna go. And one tip that I have for the eyes is that you might want to draw them both at the same time. I like to do the top only, and then I can go ahead in and draw the circles, and I don't even have to draw the bottom of the eye because it's not really that necessary. And the same thing goes for this one. You want to draw the top of the eyes, and I actually draw the top of the eyes on the eye line because I want to keep everything in this bottom half of the drawing so that the whole top half of the drawing is basically their forehead, and I think that gives it a cute look. And then for the nose and the mouth, I actually don't do much. I just do little tiny lines. I feel like they really aren't that important when it comes to drawing chibi. For the eyebrows, I like to draw eyebrows, and again I'm going to do the same tip as before, drawing both eyebrows at the same time. And the other tip that I have is to draw through the hair. So you see this is going on top of the hair, and later on if I want to I could just erase it, but for now while I'm trying to figure things out I'm going to draw through the shape of the hair, just like I did over here when I drew through the body. I mean, if you like the look of the eyebrows on top of the hair, that's also an option. You know, it depends on your style and what you think looks good, right? Okay, next we're gonna move on to slightly more advanced things like the hands and the general posing. So for posing, like I mentioned earlier, you definitely want to look at reference photos and see how they're standing and what they're doing. Posing can be really hard in general. You want to start with a more straight on pose like I mentioned earlier. Okay, so for the hands, there's a few things you can do. Again, this is one of the more advanced things, but if you want to go really simple, you can just add these little spikes up at the top, and that could be a really simple way to do a hand. You just add 3 little spikes and it looks very cute and very simple. But if you want to have some more detailed hands that can express a little bit more emotion, then I have a little trick that I like to call the mittens -1. So basically, if you draw a mitten, you can do that. That is definitely a way of drawing a hand. But the mittens -1 method draws the mitten like usual, but then we actually take out one finger, and usually I like to do the index finger, but you can take out a different one if you want. So you could do that, or you could do the tiny finger, this one, you know, the promise one. What's it called? The pinky. There we go. I tend to like the index finger one better, but you know, it's up to you. And you can actually vary this, so you can make it doing the number 1 finger. So you do the number 1, the big circle for all the other fingers, and a little circle for the thumb. Or you could do what we're gonna do on this picture, which is the peace sign. I'm gonna do 2 fingers making a V, and then we're gonna do a large circle and a small circle for all of the rest of the fingers. For the other hand, I'm gonna do the hand holding onto the waist. So I'm gonna do the thumb over here, and then I'm gonna use the mitten -1 method, where I draw the index finger, and then I draw the rest of the fingers, and she's holding her hand. Ta-da! And that basically is how you draw chibi. Of course, you can do it however you want. You can do it more detailed, you can do it less detailed, but I think this is a good place to start. Now, I'm actually going to go in and draw a little friend for her or something. We'll see. And I'll show you guys that in a time lapse, and I'll be following all of the tips that I gave here, and maybe I'll include some extra tips, and then I'll show you the final drawing after I finish it and color it in.